U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are set to visit the families of the victims of the Texas school shooting. 19 children and 2 adults were killed when a teenage gunman opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde on Tuesday. Reports reveal that Salvador Ramos was on the school grounds for an hour before he opened fire. He was later killed by police. President Biden says the intention of his visit is to personally convey his condolences to those affected by the worst mass shooting at a school in nearly a decade.
Let me say a few words about what happened in Uvalde, Texas, elementary school. Since I spoke last night, the confirmed death toll has tragically climbed, including another teacher and 3 more students. Jill and I will be traveling to Texas in the coming days to meet with the families and let them know we have just a sense of their pain, and hopefully bring some little comfort to the community in shock, in grief, and in trauma. As a nation, I think we all must be there for them, everyone. And we must ask, when in God's name will we do what needs to be done to, if not completely stop, fundamentally change the amount of the carnage that goes on in this country? To state the obvious, and Corey and a lot of other people here, I'm sick and tired. I'm just sick and tired of what's going on.
Let's talk more about the Texas Elementary School mass shooting now with the New York Times Houston Bureau Chief J. David Goodman. A very good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the program. So President Biden will visit the families of the victims to pay his condolences and offer words of comfort. But what's clear is that American society is past the point of condolences. What people want most is action on gun laws.
Well, you know, it's interesting here in Texas. I think there's certainly a large percentage of the population in America that does want action on gun laws, but there's a very strong and vocal and quite powerful, in fact, part of the voting electorate in Texas that opposes any new laws. And in fact, what you've seen in the course of the last 10 years in America since Sandy Hook Elementary School, which was a horrific shooting, the last horrific shooting before the one in Uvalde, where 20 children were killed. There were 19 killed here in Texas. What you've seen over the last decade is actually a loosening of gun laws. And in Texas, in fact, last year they passed a law that essentially allows anyone to carry a gun without a permit. So as these school shootings seem to be accumulating, we've actually in the United States seen a move in the opposite direction that other countries have taken after similar shootings like this. And
Governor Greg Abbott, under whose leadership we saw the removal of the permit requirement in September last year, in reacting to the shooting at Robb Elementary, in fact, suggested that it's more of a mental health issue. And I wonder how much that position resonates with American society, in Texas specifically today.
That's right. I mean, I think particularly among Republicans and among advocates for Second Amendment rights to carry guns in the United States, that is the position, and that is the kind of what the gun lobby in the United States would say, is that this is not a problem of guns. This is a problem of people who have mental illness or who are in other ways, quote unquote, evil, misusing these guns. And this is the trouble in the United States, is that this is a fundamental right. And so, it's up there with the freedom of speech. And so there are large parts of the country who have that as their core belief, that, this is protecting and not destroying, society here.
But it's also,
so that's the challenge. Sorry.
It's also a massive assumption, is it not, to then say all mass shooters in the United States are dealing with a mental health issue when that's not necessarily true.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, in this case, as Governor Abbott was saying, in the same press conference that he's saying this, that the root of these mass shootings is mental illness, he has to admit that this particular shooter had no history of mental illness and had no criminal history. And in fact, there was very little in his official record, at least, that would indicate that he was someone, who was going to go on to do something like this. And in fact, it was perfectly legal for him to go out within the week before the shooting and purchase one AR-15 style rifle, and then a few days later purchase another one. He's an 18-year-old. He had just turned 18. In fact, the day before, actually, he bought the first rifle. And that's how the law works in the United States. He had no history of the type that the governor was suggesting, and so was perfectly able to go buy these weapons.
You've got last September in Texas the rolling back of a requirement for people to at least have a permit before they buy guns. There's also the issue of a lack of background checks before people are able to get guns in America. In fact, one commentator speaking in response to the Robb Elementary mass shooting said that it's in fact easier for youngsters in the States at the moment to get a gun than it is for them to buy alcohol. Now, given where we are now, is anything actually going to change post the outrage? Because as you say, every year we revisit this conversation and there are calls to challenge the gun lobby, but nothing changes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really know at this point. If you remember back to 2012 when the Sandy Hook shooting happened, there was horror across the country at it, and you sort of had a feeling that things really were going to change at that moment. It doesn't feel the same now. Unfortunately, in the United States, even an elementary school shooting, even the killing of 7 to 10-year-old children, is not enough to sort of shake people to doing something to change the situation. And this is the second one of these that we've had. After the first one, there was quite a lot of outrage. After this one, there's similar outrage, but there's some familiarity. And I think there's a lot of, among gun control advocates, sort of throwing up their hands and wondering if there's other ways to make changes. You've seen actually some states try to do it themselves, and you're hearing in California and in New York there's going to be some gun control measures that are going to be taken up. But in places like Texas, where gun rights are paramount, there's absolutely no conversation like that.
To what extent are American politicians not introducing stricter gun control laws in order to preserve their own career ambitions? Because some say if they were to go against the powerful gun lobby, the National Rifle Association, for example, that would have dire personal consequences for their ambitions as career-wise.
That is precisely the dynamic here, and what you see, and some of my colleagues have reported on this. If you look at the 2022 congressional campaigns, the Republican candidates are frequently featuring weapons and guns and themselves shooting guns in their campaign ads, because that speaks to the Republican electorate. We're talking about primaries here. That speaks to Republicans, and if they don't show an allegiance to that, or not an allegiance, but they don't show that they are gun people, essentially, that's a strike against them. And so I think it's not only that the gun lobby pours money into these campaigns, it's also that voters now have become accustomed to seeing guns as essentially a cultural issue. And, the United States is riven by a lot of these cultural issues now, and guns are a very visible and a very clear example of this.
New York Times Houston Bureau Chief David Goodman, good to have your time, so thank you.